Hey there friends, and welcome to day 3 of our 12 Days of Christmas in July tutorial series here on my channel. If you're just joining in, you can find links for the first 2 days at the top of the description so you can start at the beginning. If you're new around here, I hope you will consider hitting that subscribe button to join our crafty little family. And remember to check over on Instagram for daily holiday inspiration. For today's tutorial, I'm creating a staggered page mini album with a brand that is new to me. I just love this collection. It really inspired me to go over the top with all the trims and layers. This album could easily be used to document December if you like to record the holiday season. And it has lots of tuck spots, photo mats, inserts, and cut apart images. So if that sounds good to you, then stick with me and we'll make it together. Okay, so here is that collection that I mentioned. This is Warm Wishes from Vivki Boutin, and I did pick up the 6x8 paper pad along with the 12x12 sheet of cut apart. So I have already removed quite a lot of this one and there wasn't enough to show the full thing, but this is what I have remaining of that. And so I think this collection is really kind of opposite of our first 2 videos where we had some very traditional colors but with more whimsical images and patterns. This one is very traditional patterns, but the colors are very fresh, maybe retro inspired and a little bit whimsical. So I really think this is going to be a fun take on this kind of project where we can go from vintage to retro. And also I do have quite a lot of this paper pad left even after finishing that whole book. And then of course I'm going to save my offcuts. So you may see this one again, probably not during the 12 days series, but I really liked working with it. So I'm going to hang on to this for another project. So the base of our book is going to have 2 components. The first being the basic structure. And this is going to be where the scoring and folding happens. When we get this part assembled, we're going to come back in and add some sturdiness with much thicker cardstock. And so that will be phase 2 of the base. For our first piece, we're going to work with the bottom portion that is the widest, and we'll work our way up, and then it will get thinner as we go along. So the first piece is 65 pound weight cardstock. It measures 15¼ inches wide, and I hope that's mostly all on screen, and then 6 inches high. So this is going to be scored at 7 and 7¼ and so that's going to give us room in the spine for all of our layers. And then as we work along, we're going to be decreasing by inch increments so that we can have all of those beautiful paper patterns showing. And I'm just going to kind of position this on the table so that I can see these corners and get them lined up. And I'm going to bring in the second piece. This one is 13¼ by 6 inches high. I have it scored at 6 and 6¼ and I think this is a very good place to have those 2 glues. So let's just go ahead and add a little bit of Tombow to our double-sided adhesive tape. I'm bringing that in quite away from the edge because I don't want it to splooge out. And I'm going to line it up by bringing those corners together and then along the side and make sure the bottom is nice and even. And that tape will hold it in place while the glue sets up. So now we have our base layer, the first portion of the staggered pages, and then we're going to do the same thing for this. So I'll open that back up, bring in our third piece. So this one measures 11¼ by 6. It's scored at 5 and also 5¼ so each of our sections are going to have that 1/4 inch spine. And we'll bring in that Tombow again. I'm going to do the same thing for this layer and just bring those corners together. Make sure the sides are nice and even, and then press that into place. So this is going to be the basic structure of our book. You can see how when we fold it, we're going to get those pages revealed with each layer that we go up. So now what I want to do is bring in our 110-pound cardstock, and like we did before, we'll start at the back and work our way up. So our first piece is 6 by 8 inches, and I think that it will be fine with just our double-sided adhesive. So I'll do the same process, just bringing those corners together, making sure that everything is nice and straight and even. So for the next page, our piece is still going to be 6 inches high, but now we're at 7 inches wide. And we'll just continue to stack on all of those layers. The next section is going to be 6 by 6. And then for the top page, I did decide to include 2 layers, so I'll put one on the inside. Before we put the one on the outside, I do want to kind of close in this spine just so that it has a nicer, more finished look, and it will be a better surface to add our pattern paper onto. So I've already added my double-sided adhesive to each of these 1/4 inch sections, and I'll just peel that off now. I'm going to bring in my scoreboard, and then I have my piece cut that will act as the cover for the spine. So I have this measured to be 6 inches by 4 3/4, and we'll score it on the scoreboard after we adhere it, just so that I make sure to have everything measured out exactly. So I put a little tape along the sides and almost to the center, and I left that middle portion without tape because I want to be able to press this spine into that area, and then I'll fold it up. I think it would also be a good idea to include a little bit more of that tombow. I don't want to go too far over, just adding that close to the edge. And then I will press this into place, and I'm just sort of guessing that center once I have it turned over so that I can get it lined up along the bottom. And then I'll press it as I go along. Remove this now, and I will hold this to the scoreboard right where the edge of our book meets one of the grooves in the board, and then I'll score it and then press that over. That score line is going to make a nice crisp fold on the outside, and it'll be a much nicer shape for your book. Let's do the same thing for this side. And then fold that over. Then I'll just open my book and really give that a good pressure so that I know it is well adhered. You can bend these pages back and forth as you go along just to make sure that you've got everything lined up exactly where you want. So now I can come in and add that second layer of the 110-pound to the cover. Remember, this piece is 6 high by 5 wide, same as on the inside. And we'll just get that lined up here. And that is going to be our base. So I think this was pretty nice for just about any collection where you want to show off a lot of layers at the same time. So now we can go ahead and bring in our pattern papers and finish this up. So we're continuing to work from the back forward, and all of the pages that are going to be on the right will have a belly band, and all the pages on the left are going to have a special photo mat area. So the first thing I did was choose the pattern that I wanted to be the band, and I'm going to use this throughout. The measurements will be the same for each of the pages, even though they're going to be shorter, and this is going to be scored before I add it to the book, and that just helps me to make sure that I have the score lines in exactly the right place. So as I do, I'll bring this to the top of the scoreboard. It doesn't matter what measurement it lands on. I'm just looking for a groove at the very edge. I'll shift this over and then put another score line on the full groove. That way I know I won't have any page buckling or any warping when I flip this over. And this particular pattern is a very good neutral because we have a lot of other patterns working. Before I add this to the page, I'm going to include this little clip, just a Tim Holtz mini clip, and you'll see why later as we work along. So the first thing I want to do is make a little more room for us to work, and I'm going to pull the tape here so that I can wrap that band around. I'm looking to go maybe an inch in. This is not an exact measurement, but I do want it to be pretty even so that we have the same reveal of the pattern paper on the side there and it isn't crooked. So that will hold that into place. And then let's go ahead and pull the rest of the tape. I have chosen to not to have the solid color cardstock just because that would be a whole extra layer, and I think that might be too much for pages that are all revealed at one time. So I'm just using the full page for the pattern paper so I can line these up just as easily with the edges as I did when I made the base. So remember, we're working from the back forward, which means this piece is going to be 6 by 8 inches, and that covers the entire back. And while I'm at it, I'll just go ahead and add the back on as well. So I picked this beautiful plaid, and I'm using it for the front, the back, and the spine as well. So our piece on the back is going to be 6 by 8 again, and then our spine is going to be 6, but I reduced it just a little so that the raw edge won't show when it's folded. So this is 5/8 by 6 inches. And now we have the back covered and our right hand page on. So this will be what shows when the book is closed. So as I mentioned, I'm going to have the pattern paper and I'll match the two sets of pages just because I think it gives it a more consistent look. I'm going to just continue to use my double-sided adhesive. That will work perfectly for this, and it's so easy to assemble because I'm not worried about getting everything centered in the middle of a cardstock layer. So this is a nice place to bring in your offcuts. There wasn't a whole lot because the paper pad itself was 6 by 8. So I did have a few of the patterns that had offcuts, and so I'm just going to utilize those as a layering pattern. I think that will look a little bit more detailed. So like I mentioned, I am going to bring in a photo mat, and this is just a die cut with a layering pattern on it. I put that up on a spacer just so you can tell this is a area for a special picture. For these inside pages, I'm using the Frilly Lace rectangle nested die. This is from Gina Marie Designs, and I'm using the largest one that came in that 3-piece set, and I'm going to center it top to bottom, but position it slightly to the left so that we are adding more support to the outside of that book. And so the spacer on the pattern paper, but just the double-sided tape on our rectangle doily. Okay, so the next thing I want to add is an insert, obviously, so that we can increase the amount of space we have to finish this when it's completed. So I'm going to start with 110-pound cardstock. I want this to be very sturdy so that, you know, we can add pictures and put journaling on. I've also included one of the journal cards. This one is nice because it has lines, so that would be nice to include your memories on that. This is, like I said, 110-pound cardstock. The first tag in the back will be longer, but they're all going to be 5 inches high, and that will help them to slide underneath that belly band. So this one is 5 by 7 for the cardstock, and the pattern paper is 4 7/8 by 6 7/8, and that slides right under there. So the next thing I want to add is an additional image from those cut aparts. I think they're just so sweet and nature inspired. That kind of drew me to this collection. So that will be the position. I want it to go all the way over to the spine so that it won't show when the book is closed. So there is additional room inside this band if you want to tuck in additional items like more pictures or flat keepsakes or mementos. So you can really build up this album and fill it in. So let's go ahead and continue to work along for the rest of the pages. So as we work along, remember that we're going to have the same basic page layout, but the measurements are going to change for each set of pages because we reduce the width. So for this page, this piece is going to be 6 inches high, and this time it is 7 inches wide. The left-hand page is going to be 6 inches high by 6 inches wide. So I'll just go ahead and flip that over and add this now. This is going right on up to the edge. This is such a pretty shade of green with a very non-contrasting kind of evergreen and pine cone pattern. Here's another one of those offcuts. I'll just put that right here on the end again. And here is our photo mat. Remember, we're positioning this slightly to the left. I think this is a neutral enough background that you could also write on this page if you wanted to have a little bit of journaling. So my insert for this set of pages on the 110-pound cardstock is 5 inches high by 6 inches wide, and I have that journal card cut apart clipped on the top, and this is a great way to add more journaling or have a special photo. I'll slide that in all the way over, and then the image for this set of pages is from the 12 by 12 cut apart sheet. There was different images on that sheet than there was in the paper pad, and I wanted to be able to use both. So that is for this set. Okay, so for this last section, our pattern paper here measures 6 by 6, and remember to bring it right on up to that edge. And that goes on that side. The left-hand side is going to be 5 by 6. I think the most fun part of this was mixing and matching these really beautiful holiday patterns and coming up with similar but different combinations. So remember, we're going to add our layering bit, and this was that beautiful diagonal plaid from the cover. And here is our photo mat. This one can be centered because this page is pretty small. And it has those beautiful foam spacers. Here is the insert for the first set of pages, but the last one that we're adding. The 110-pound cardstock here is a 5-inch square. The pattern paper is 4 7/8 by 4 7/8. I've got one more of those sweet cut aparts clipped on, and remember that goes all the way over so that they won't show when the book is closed. See how cute that turned out. Now we would typically be moving on to the cover. One item I want to do first is to add the most awesomely layered trim with pom-poms. I'm using a lace from Really Reasonable Ribbon, and I am using 2 layers of this pom-pom trim. Now I picked up this from Amazon, and when I went to look to get you guys a link, they didn't have the specific one that I picked up, but they do have a lot available. The one I have came in a bucket and it had lots of different colors, so you can just go ahead and search pom-pom trim if you're interested in adding this layer. and you'll have a lot of options to pick from. The best way I think to get these adhered to each other is like I have on the flowers. I work off project and then I add it as a finished unit, and I just glued my pom-pom trim down to that plastic placemat that I had picked up for my flower making so that I could keep everything nice and straight. There's 2 layers of the pom-poms, 1 layer of lace, and then just on the edge I put a little bit of tinsel trim. So I initially want to put it on the edge, but that leaves it exposed and it would just fall over on the back side. So we're going to have to add it to this layer if we want those palms to be protected. And you see I did measure that out to extend a little bit past so that I could center it just how I wanted it. And so let's go ahead and just open up our book and take this out so I don't accidentally glue anything to anything that I don't want glued. And so it is meant to fit down the whole back with the portion of the pom-pom trim right at the edge of the page. So I think it will be best to hot glue it a little bit at a time so that I can keep it nice and straight. So I did decide to go ahead and do that off camera because I wanted to pull it close enough to me so that I could get it all glued on straight and the edges cut off. You will see that there is no problem getting that tag tucked in to that. This does not interfere with that at all. But look how sweet that looks now with all that extra trim. It's so textural and chunky and flashy and all the things you want when you're trying to go over the top with your trim. So now you got to put on a little bit of ribbon if you're going to have a closure, which I think you definitely want with this because all of your layers are at different widths. And so I'll just wrap this trim around of the back. Someone asked me one time why I don't secure it underneath the back, and that's just because I really love ribbon and I want to be able to see it. So I'm just adding it and then wrapping it. It will need to be secured on the cover, but I think I want it to show on the back. So I'm going to sort of position this so that I can work it in between those palms, and I do want a generous length so that I can tie a good size bow here. So I'll just start by estimating what I want. This is the Coral Mini Plaid from Really Reasonable Ribbon, and I think this is matching this pattern paper really well because it isn't exactly bright pink. It has a little bit of an orange cast to it. So I'm just going to measure this so I get it pretty even. And then I'll tack that into place temporarily with a little bit of that glue. So I'm working along the cover using that same pretty plaid as I did for the back and the spine, and this is going to be a background for some additional layers that we will add, and that will go right there. The next layer I have to add is a raised section. So I'm going to center this right in the middle. So this is 4 by 5, and that gives us a nice amount of that plaid showing all the way around, and that is on foam spacer. I want to include another doily. This is the Frilly Lace Nested Square. This is also from Gina Designs, and once again I picked the largest die in the set, and I'm going to top it with a layering pattern. So this is just the B-side that I have as I'm working along on these layers. It has a little bit of a non-contrasting sort of music background with a little whitewash on it. This one does not have a spacer, but the focal image does, and this kind of was the whole inspiration for this album because I just absolutely adore those chickadees. All the winter birds are just my favorite, and this one has such a simple little evergreen bough behind it, so I think that is super beautiful. It did come from one of the 3x4 cut apart. I clipped it out where the natural border was just so that I would have space for more of those layers, and I did include a clip there just because it seemed to be a theme as I was working along. Now, when it comes to the flower arrangement, we can all agree that this is very large, and did I use it anyway? Yes, I did, because it's beautiful. So this is a combination of die cut foliage and my usual netting and twine. I've included this time some sprigs that came from a berry branch. They were having like all the little berries, and I pulled them off and adhered them to the back. These flowers here in the background are my Spellbinders Be Bold blooms, and I just made that with a pink cardstock and layered it offset so that it would be a nice full flower. And then this is a Spellbinders poinsettia, and this is very dimensional, very detailed. I did add prills to the center so that I could build some dimension, and I think this is fairly authentic or accurate for poinsettias to have a green center. I added my Aline faux snow along the edges. Once it was dried, I did top that with some glitter, and before I did that finishing, I did a little bit of inking on the petals. So this is really over the top, and that's kind of what I wanted for this album, is just to, you know, bring in as many of these sweet details as I could. And so this is just barely gonna fit on the bottom here, and I'm just being careful to keep as much of these fragile bits on to the cover as I can. Of course, we're gonna have to use some hot glue because that arrangement is so heavy. So I've got my flowers adhered there to the bottom. I need to have a balance, so I'll bring my charms up here to the top. These are just pine cones. I think that is perfect for the theme of our mini album, and I'll add those as I do with my hot glue and twisting that in so that I can have both of those sets of string going right through that glue. I will remove the excess and then top those cut ends with a vintage button. And then I do have a couple of sequins here to add, so I'll put those on in a set of 3 right up here on the other corner, and I'll get those adhered with my Tombow. I'm going to bring my ribbon up now from the edge, and I'll tie my bow right here in the front. That just gives it a whole lot of extra beautiful detail. This is a good time for our question of the day. Would you rather meet Frosty the Snowman or Rudolph the reindeer? For me, it's Rudolph, as I don't want to make friends with someone if I know they're going to eventually melt. So let me know in the comments, hashtag Team Frosty or hashtag Team Rudolph. So that's all for our Staggered page mini album for day 3. Remember to come back tomorrow for day 4. If you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I appreciate every interaction. There's links in the description for the products I mentioned here today, as well as for our socials. And as always, I'm wishing you a happy and productive day, and I thank you so much for watching. Bye.